All right, a fresh weather for Weather Geeks on this Tuesday evening. Our weather remains very, very quiet, so we're going to focus a lot on Matthew this evening, which doesn't have much, actually has no impact on our weather whatsoever, but I find it interesting, and it's a big weather story, so hopefully you don't mind that. But let's talk about our weather here at home. We had a forecast miss today. 74 was the forecast. It underachieved today. Temperature only struggled up to about 70 degrees, still above average, and I say struggled up like it's a bad thing. It was still a beautiful, beautiful afternoon, and certainly a bargain for this time of the year, but we like to get the forecast right, and we were a little overdone temperature-wise today. Cool time-lapse from our weather camera in Youngstown today. This is up on our transmitter tower just south of downtown, and it's up a few hundred feet, and it's interesting. We'll watch this again. The top of the fog layer this morning was just about at camera height. You can see blue sky towards the top of the screen. Fog then burned off, and we had a beautiful, beautiful afternoon with just a few passing fair weather clouds. The air is very dry. Great evening to check out the crescent moon in the western sky, and also a bright Venus down and I believe to the right, below and to the right of the crescent moon. Very bright Venus this evening, and with such a dry atmosphere, really nice visibility for checking out those celestial objects this evening. Here on the water vapor imagery, you can see there is a little bit of high-level moisture trying to sneak into western Ohio, and that'll kind of manifest itself in a few cirrus clouds, especially west of I-71 overnight. All right, Matthew. It's made landfall in Haiti last night and this morning. Now it's making another landfall on the eastern tip of Cuba. I mean, this is way out, just on the eastern tip of Cuba. And Matthew's still a very strong storm. Category 4. Maximum sustained winds of 140, gusts to 165. Pressure at 949 millibars. Notice the speed. It's moving off to the north at 9. Now, this isn't cooking along, but it's also not stationary. It's moving at a halfway decent clip. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what may happen as we go through time here with Matthew. Interesting development this afternoon with the European model coming in. I'm going to show you it in just a second. European model, bad news for Florida, better news for the Carolinas. I'll show you why, again, in just a moment. But whatever ultimately ends up happening, whatever the end game is with Matthew, this is bad news for the entire island chain of the Bahamas. Might go right over Nassau in a couple of days here, Wednesday into Thursday. This is the official National Hurricane Center track. What I expect to have happen is with the 11 p.m. advisory, and then perhaps again with the 5 a.m. advisory, I would expect the center of this track to be more like this. In the western cone, more like over here. There's been a distinct westward jog in the modeling today, and the European model that came in early this afternoon really threw weather forecasters for a loop. Now, the end game here on the current National Hurricane Center track hasn't changed that much, rolling it through the Outer Banks, probably, and then perhaps even heading up into southern New England. Now, the latest European model would say, no way, this thing will stay down here and not even threaten the Outer Banks. So, interesting developments this afternoon. We'll see what happens with the overnight modeling. Here's a look at the GFS and the European. This is the sea level pressure. Notice as we go into Friday, pretty similar here in the placement of the low, right along the Florida coast, right over the Kennedy Space Center, right over Jacksonville. And then what happens after that? Well, notice this big high, the circular area up here, that is going to have an influence on where this decides to go. The placement of that high will be very important. This is where we really start to diverge by this late in the weekend, Saturday night into Sunday. The GFS looks kind of like the Hurricane Center track, kind of moving it up like this. That's the orange. The blue is the European. Notice how much slower it's gotten now. By Sunday morning, it's still kind of down here. And then it doesn't go any farther north. Look at the GFS blasting this thing up through, the Gulf Stream and not making landfall in New England, but bringing some waves and some wind, maybe to Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. But the European's way down here now. It kind of loops it around like this. It's really a wild development, and it might be a fluke, but anytime the European model does something, we pay attention to it because it's generally considered to be the superior model in the mid-latitudes. That doesn't mean it's always right. It's just right more often. So anyway, again, not really much of an impact at all on our weather, but it's interesting nonetheless. The current Hurricane Center probability of tropical storm winds, if you have friends down in Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Savannah, they have a decent chance, probably up to 60% right now, of seeing tropical storm force winds. That would be 39 miles per hour or greater. Hurricane force wind probabilities way high down in the Bahamas. Pretty high and increasing on the eastern coast of Florida. But the odds have definitely decreased of hurricane force wind problems for the Outer Banks and down towards Wilmington and Myrtle Beach and Charleston. So, if you have friends or relatives down in the Carolinas, make sure they've got a trusted weather source. They're following the latest forecasts, and same holds true if you have friends in Orlando and Jacksonville and Miami, West Palm Beach, places like that. Make sure they have a trusted weather source and that they are keeping in tune with the latest forecasts. My phone is ringing, pardon that. The 8 to 14 day outlook here looks like this. We're looking much above average, it looks like, in the longer range. We're talking about, again, this is 8 to 14 days, so late next week into the following week, a overwhelmingly warm signal for the entire U.S., the lower 48 anyway, and perhaps much above out in the middle of the country. So, anyway, if you're longing for hoodie weather, we've got Sunday coming up, when it might not be much better than the lower 60s. But then, well, I'll tell you, autumn is going to be slow to set in based on what it looks like in the longer range. Thanks for watching tonight's Weather for Weather Geeks. I will see you tonight on 21 News at 11. Have a great rest of this Tuesday.